Hey, what's happening, everybody? Dave Cooper, DaveCooper.live, and we have an exciting show for you today. What's happening, Justin and Miles? Let me get these banners off here.
What's going on?
Not a whole lot.
I was just rocking out the intro music. That's what I was doing. I don't know if you can see me bopping.
I know, you guys are all in the fish tank. So, Justin, I didn't tell you that. If you're ever off the screen, I can still see what you're doing. So don't do anything foolish or be silly about it. So. All right, everybody, this is an episode of Increasing Influence with Dave Cooper and Miles Biggs from Biggs Ideas. And today's special guest is Justin Nguyen. Justin is an up-and-coming LinkedIn guy, professional, podcaster, and several other things. So if you are just joining us, I would like if you could hit that like and share button right now so we can spread the word about what we're doing. And also, do not forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel. So with that said, Justin, welcome. We always start the show by saying, you know what, Justin, in 5 minutes, I want you to tell us everything from the time you were born until the time right now and give us your history, but you only have 5 minutes to do it. Go for it.
All right, let's see what we can do. So I want to say the first 18 years of my life, 17, 18 years of my life, I was all about soccer. Loved soccer, played like 30 to 40 hours every single week, from practices and games on the weekend. And then I thought I was going to go and play in college, go pro. And all of a sudden I broke my leg my junior year of high school. So that's what led me down this whole sort of path of I need to figure out what I want to do for the rest of my life, because I wasn't going to be playing soccer in college. And I started to think about, okay, let me go to college and see what there is. One thing led to another, and my roommate saw that I was doing really well in this video game of trading. So on this video game, there's like a stock market aspect, and I traded to 1 million coins in like the first 3 months of the game. And he was like, dude, you can do this in real life and make a ton of money. And I didn't know about the stock market or anything like that. And that's what got me into finance. So I chose finance as my major. That led me to business, led me to a guy that you guys might know, Gary Vee. Found out about his content, led me to entrepreneurship, and I started to try to find internships, because that was sort of the next thing that I wanted to do in college, because that's what you're supposed to do. I had the Near 4.0, I had the student clubs, did everything that, again, I was supposed to be doing, and I applied to like 50 plus internships, and I couldn't get one. Didn't even get a call back. So I was like, what the heck is going on? And I tried to figure out what was going on in terms of why these kids that had lesser grades than me and were doing less on campus, why were they getting internships and I wasn't? And throughout this time, by the time I graduated, I finished with 5 internships, 3 at Fortune 150 companies, and I learned all these different cheat codes. And now my goal with Get Your Grind Up is building up this media company that's able to make career education cool for the younger generation, and ultimately make it so that they're seeking career education rather than just going to it during their senior year when it's really just that's too late in their career. So that's basically everything that I've done in a nutshell, and LinkedIn has played an absolute huge role in all of that.
Yeah, for sure. Miles, I mean, you got to interview Justin, so I think it's just so appropriate for you kind of give the intro, because what he just talked about is so important, right? Especially today. It's not just college kids in the job market. It's a lot of people in the job market.
Right. And so many people stop learning once they graduate college, right? Which is silly if we're not continuing to develop our skills, even when we enter the workforce. You look what happens now. Something like COVID hits, people get laid off, and they don't have marketable skills because they were just all in on one spot and weren't continuing to develop themselves, right? So I think what he's doing is awesome, and the cheat codes can apply to people in college and elsewhere. And so I'm curious, you piqued my interest there. There's probably a cheat code in your story right there about why were those kids getting internships and you weren't able to, and what did you figure out that tipped it to then you had 5 when you graduated?
Yeah. So, I mean, the biggest thing for me was I went into college thinking if you do all the things that you're supposed to do, you're supposed to be given an internship, basically. Because if you get good grades, then that should lead you to a job or an internship. And what I ended up finding is most of these internships are filled with connections. I didn't know about that in the business world, right? Everyone always talks about it's about who you know, not what you know. And that concept, we'll talk about it a little bit more, and how I sort of think that there's something else to that. But I needed to grow my network. And pretty much every internship that I got didn't come from a traditional application process. I don't think I even applied to any of them in the first way. It was all about me meeting up with people. And for instance, my very first internship was with Northwestern Mutual. And at the time, they had like the #1 ranking finance internship in the US. And the way that I got that was one of the kids that I played soccer with growing up in high school. He was a senior when I was a freshman. He ended up being the college unit director at Northwestern. And I just hit him up one day and said, hey, Bilal, I would love to grab some ice cream with you one day. Would you be down to just talk? And so I was talking about what I'm doing. We got some great ice cream. And then one thing led to another. And we ended the conversation and he asked me if I wanted an internship. And this was already, I want to say 2 or 3 weeks into like internship season in the summer. And he basically just pushed me through the whole process. I had one interview where they're like, hey, B is a great person for the company. He basically vouched for you. So we're just doing this as a formality. We'd love to give you the offer for the internship. And once I figured that out, I was like, okay, so it's not necessarily about what you know. Like, yes, you obviously need to know the skills for when you do get the job. But in order to be seen, you have to be seen. And I think that's what school fails to tell a lot of students.
Sure.
I love that. In order to be seen, you have to be seen, right? So here you are. Like I look and I say, well, you're a personable guy, right? Obviously, you're outgoing, you're outspoken. You have you got a nice personality and persona about yourself. I would almost assume that you had connections or you were networking all the time, but that's just not the case, right?
Yeah, I mean, not really. So both of and that kind of comes from my parents' background. So both of my parents are Vietnamese refugees, and they came here when they were very young, like 8 to 10 years old or so. So my mom went to college and she has a job in computer science, but typically people in computer science, that's a very technical field. So they don't go out and have a lot, like a big network, unfortunately. And my dad, he never went to college. So he's been working in a more blue collar job sort of his whole life. So in terms of like my professional network, it was very small to begin with. And I was kind of starting from zero, especially in the world of business. And everything that I started off with, it came from either soccer connections or creating content on LinkedIn. And that's why I think LinkedIn is such a beautiful equalizer if people know how to use it. But the problem is most people don't know how to use it. They just put their information on there and they think that jobs are just going to come into your messages. That's just simply not the case.
Yeah, I agree with that. What do you think, Miles? You getting a lot of jobs from LinkedIn?
I haven't gotten jobs yet, but definitely it's funny, the conversation starters, right? Which could lead to jobs if I were looking for one, right? So I get a lot of people now. I've been doing a video every single morning for 40 days. And it's just an experiment in my
Justin, just hold on a second now, because what we all have to say is, well, it's about time.
Yeah, Dave was bragging me for 3 years. You still don't have your podcast yet, Dave.
About time.
You can't talk. Once you have a podcast, then we're even. But so I've been doing it, and visits to my profile are up, right? Like to your point, if you just build it, not everybody's going to come. But my profile visits are up 400% just by doing these little 1-minute videos, and I'm getting a lot of people reaching out and saying, "Hey, I've been loving what you're doing with this," and then it's a conversation starter, and they'll ask me advice for something, and it's how you not just have a network, just static numbers, but you start to cultivate those relationships, which then can turn into those jobs you're referencing, right? So I'm curious to hear from you and all you figured out and what you talk about on your podcast and at your media company. People that are watching this, they're obviously on LinkedIn, maybe on LinkedIn. This is also live on YouTube and Instagram, Facebook, right? But if they're watching on LinkedIn as an example, how do they start making it work for them instead of just being one of those static people? Like, what's a cheat code for creating content on LinkedIn to build the network, cultivate the network, and turn it into something?
Yeah, I think the first thing that you're going to want to do on LinkedIn is once you have your profile optimized, and there's a whole bunch of people that can help you with that. We don't have to really dive too deep into that. But the one concept that I want you to understand as anyone listening is you want your LinkedIn profile to be a landing page rather than a resume. So when someone goes to your LinkedIn profile, they know exactly what jobs you're looking for, what your skills are, et cetera. And I think a lot of people fail to do that. The second thing we're talking about with what Miles is bringing up in terms of content, what you want to do is make sure that the right people are seeing your content. So what I always tell students is, let's say you want a job in investment banking, which typically is a very hard job to get, especially if you're coming from a non-target school. What you're going to want to do is connect with all of the recruiters and the individuals that are in your exact position or the exact position that you want at the companies that you want to work for, whether that's Goldman Sachs, JP Morgan, Deutsche Bank, whatever that may be. And the reason that you're going to want to connect with them is so that when you do produce the content, it pops up on their timeline. And so the way that the content funnel would kind of work is, let's say a company that you follow releases earnings, you create a whole article showcasing your Excel skills, talking about all of the financial theories that you learned in school, and saying whether or not you believe this is a good stock to buy or not, and then creating an article on LinkedIn with that. What you're then going to do is, after you've connected with all of those individuals, you can send that article to those recruiters, those hiring managers, whoever it may be at that company, and you can ask for their advice of, hey, what do you think about this? And every once in a while, someone's going to answer you. So if you connect with 50 people, maybe 5 people will answer you. And then you can get some feedback in terms of what you did good on that article and what you did bad. And you can get an idea of what that company is expecting, because you can ask them for advice in terms of the next time that you want to produce some piece of content. And that's how you start the conversation. And that's so much better than you trying to reach out to a recruiter saying, hey, Miles, I would love to work for Goldman Sachs. Do you have a job open? Like, the chances of you answering that, probably very slim. But if I reached out to you showcasing that I've done a little bit of work and I'm asking for your piece of advice on this, chances are you're going to answer a lot more with that.
Totally. And that's an awesome cheat code piece of advice for college students, but literally anybody on LinkedIn. Switch out college student looking for a job to salesperson looking to land a client, and industry commentary and asking for that advice or opinion, not just going in for the hard sale, which I hate, by the way. I've done a video about this, right? All those people that just slam your LinkedIn inbox saying, hey, thanks for connecting, buy this. It's like, immediately I'm turned off. And so all those recruiters get bombarded by that generic message, like you said. But then they're like, oh man, this person took the time to do this on their own. And then, building on your point, right, if your profile's a landing page, they want to know what you're about. They click over, and now you've got the curated landing page to your personal brand. And now you're breaking through. You're avoiding that stack of resumes that you don't ever want to be in.
Exactly.
Yeah. And I mean, it is so true. And so this is the tricky part. So you want to connect with people like Miles, like you were saying, right? Yep. But I'm the same way. If I have 100 in-mails on my LinkedIn, and hey, it's great to connect. I see you're an industry professional, blah, blah, blah. And then all of a sudden I either connect and I'm nice about it, and then I get a follow-up sales pitch. Bam, and here's our articles, here's the things. And I think it's really important to understand. I mean, that is a turnoff. Maybe just because we get so much of it, maybe if you're just new to it, it wouldn't be. But, Justin, as you're growing this thing, I mean, there is LinkedIn etiquette, right?
Yes and no. I would say it really depends on your industry, so if you're going into a very suit and tie type of industry of like investment banking, then you're probably going to have to watch what you say and how you say it, how your profile looks, etc. But if you're in a little bit more of a laid back industry like Miles, where it's sort of like marketing, you have a little bit more room to play in terms of like how you want to portray your personal brand. Now, for me, people always ask, like, why do you have a backwards hat in your picture? I thought LinkedIn is supposed to be this professional place. And the reason that I have the backwards hat is I want to speak to students, and it's a little bit more casual. So my audience, yes, I guess a little bit could be educators and career influencers, but I want the majority of my audience to be students. And typically they resonate with someone who's a little bit more casual on their timeline, and I stand out a lot more compared to the other career guys on LinkedIn.
Yeah, for sure. And I absolutely agree with that. I think it works for, somebody like yourself and what vertical you're in, right? Obviously, I wouldn't expect a steel worker to be on my show wearing a suit. It's not what they do, right? So that, I think being yourself is it. When I meant etiquette, it's about how you approach people. It's kind of that sales pitch. It's kind of not so much about but get to know me, right? Like, where's the value in me being a connection with you? I think is more the question. What is the value? Yeah,
I think the value that, whether it's myself, you, Dave, or you, Miles, is we don't want to be sold up front, of course. But how can you, because I think everyone knows if you're in a hiring position that someone reaching out to you is probably looking to for a job or something. An interesting way to kind of play that is by asking a really unique question to them. And by really unique, I don't mean like, hey, can I pick your brain for 15 minutes? Like, everyone hates that. We don't all have 20 million minutes every single day, right, to give. So what I like to do whenever I reach out to someone on LinkedIn is I try to look at their profile to see if there's any connecting point to me, whether it be that they're from the same school, they've made a same industry switch as me, maybe they went to the same high school, or they're taking the same courses. I don't know, whatever connection point that there is. I try to find that one thing and then start a conversation from there. Because ultimately we're on LinkedIn. We know that we're there for professional purposes. But if you can build that little personal connection, that's just much more like, that's such a better bridge than saying, hey, Miles, like buy my service, or hey, Dave, buy my LinkedIn course. You know what I mean?
Yeah, like, that approach is not a copy and paste approach, right? You're looking for something unique to that individual. Because I've had that as well too, where I know someone's copy and pasting because they're not saying, hey, Miles, great to connect with you. Somebody literally said, hey, Paul, it's great to connect with you.
Yeah, I've gotten that.
That's not my name.
Yeah.
So it's like immediately just turned off. So I agree with Dave that there's etiquette and it's just how you play it. And so it's great. Great cheat codes. I'm going to keep using your phrase, Justin, for cutting through the noise.
So Justin, let's kind of jump into the cheat codes a little bit. So here I am, I'm a young college person, and I say, you know what, Justin, I've been watching your content. You seem like a cool cat. You wear your hat backwards, you're well-spoken, you're clearly intelligent. How can you help me?
I mean, I think the best thing for you to do as a college student is just pay attention to the content that I produce. So my mission has always been, I don't want to charge students for anything. And the reason that I don't want to do that is because I don't feel right putting you in more debt if you're already in a ton of student debt. So I think the average student has like $30,000 of student debt already in the US. So my whole thing is I want to create free content so that you don't have to break the bank to be successful in your life. And has that made my life a little bit more complicated in terms of like my business model and stuff? Of course. But I think it's all in good nature because I just want the best for students. So I would say the first thing that you're going to want to do for students is like subscribe to the Declassified College podcast. We're giving out a ton of cheat codes there, but also my LinkedIn stuff. I create content almost every day there too. So I am pretty active in terms of responding back to comments. If you connect with me, send me a personalized invite. I usually always connect back as long as it's, again, not a copy and paste one. So it's a LinkedIn and then Declassified College podcast, probably the two.
Is that what it is?
Yeah.
I'll pull it up and we'll put a post there. So go ahead, Miles. Let me look for this here and I'll pull it up.
Well, so flash that banner there. I was talking about Get Your Grind Up, and you said it's the name of your media agency, right? So do you want to talk to that? Because I think it is an interesting business model, like you said. You're catering to college students, but you're not charging them.
Right.
So how does your business make money? And I think that's where Get Your Grind Up comes in, right?
Yeah. So I think we're able to do this because of just how the media landscape has evolved over the past 10 or 15 years with social media and specifically like YouTube. If you're looking at YouTube now, a lot of the largest creators, they've turned into media companies, basically. If you look at David Dobrik, the Paul brothers, KSI, all these individuals, they're not just creating content anymore. They have their own subscription plans. They have merch, brand deals, all these different sort of things. And the reason that works is because their audience is so large. And I think what we're doing with Declassified College, we can reach that level in the near, and not necessarily in the near future, but in the future. So what our model is going to be in the future is not charging you for courses and content per se, but charging you for if you want to support with merch, but mostly charging companies to sponsor our stuff that want to engage with you as a student. So that can be Amazon Prime or like Google Courses because they just launched their new courses, or even LinkedIn. And that's super important because our generation, Gen Z, I believe we have like 40% of all buying power coming up. So we're going to be a huge target for a lot of marketers. And I think we're putting ourselves in a unique place where a lot of career educational institutions, they don't want to be in. If you look at typically any college or university, they try to stay far and away from creating content online. And we want to be sort of that Gen Z focused entity that's not scared to put content on the internet.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Miles.
When you talk about content in the podcast, one thing we talked about when you were on my podcast was how you structured Declassified College in a different way and how you did look to YouTube as inspiration. I'd love it if you could share that story, because I think that has implications, not just to how do you create a podcast, but in any sort of marketing strategy for people that are listening the ideology you followed, I think, applies elsewhere. So if you could go into that, I think it'd be great.
Definitely. Yeah. So we took a design thinking approach to creating this podcast. And I had never heard of design thinking before until my good friend, Colin Byard, shout out to Colin, invited me to one of his design thinking workshops. And basically what that is you want to design it from the customer's perspective rather than you creating something and just kind of going out and testing the market from there. So what we did is we looked at what was really trending in our demographic, Gen Z. And the biggest thing is going to be YouTube, right? Whether it be the number 2 search engine that we use or the number 1 consumption platform that we use. Everyone is either consuming YouTube or TikTok right now, who's under the age of 25 or so. So we needed to make sure that our content was short to match those platforms. Everything on YouTube and on TikTok is less than a minute, and YouTube typically it's 3 to 10 minutes tops. So we knew that a 60-minute long podcast episode wasn't going to fly with our audience. So what we did is we created a short 5 to 15-minute show. And then in each episode, we're incorporating 3 to 5 different perspectives. And the thought behind that is in all of these vlogs that our generation has grown up to love, there's different characters popping in and out of each episode. And that's what we wanted to do with our own show. And that's there to keep our listeners' attention throughout. So they're not just listening to my boring voice the whole time. They're getting different perspectives throughout the show.
Yeah. No, I mean, I think it's brilliant that you're taking the time to actually look at the demographic, look at the attention span of your demographic, right? Sometimes I feel my attention span's, only 30 seconds, let alone staying on their shows for an hour, sometimes longer. So tell us, what kind of traction are you getting with this, right? Because that's the podcast is one side, but you're also doing some LinkedIn consulting as well. Right. And that's another avenue of success for you.
Definitely. Yeah. So we'll hit the podcast first. So we launched the podcast in February and with zero marketing, just a few LinkedIn posts from myself. And we've been able to grow 50%, like on average, like 30 to 50% every single month. And that's all come from word of mouth. And what we're noticing is students are listening to the show and they're watching multiple episodes. So they're binging it like a series on Netflix. And we've actually had a few students reach out that said those specific words. And to me, when we heard that, it's like, oh, we're onto something now. Because if we can make career education something that students are binging, then we've cracked the code in some way, shape, or form. Because typically career education and students, they just run away from each other. And they're actually paying attention and listening to multiple episodes at once. So that's on the podcast side. The momentum has been great, and we're looking to further that with our new marketing initiative, which we've just brought on this new internship program. And basically the purpose of that is to bring the Declassified College podcast to different campuses around the world. It was crazy to see that we have students from India, Pakistan, Toronto, and the West Coast of Canada as well, right, tuning into the show, as well as the States, but that wanted to be a part of this internship program. So that's going to be great to see how that plays out over the next 3 or so months till the end of the year. Now, in terms of on the LinkedIn side, consulting has been great. It's been something that I kind of started because I needed money to fund Get Your Grind Up. It wasn't something that I had ever thought that I would be doing, but people started to reach out to me asking if I could help them with their profile or their optimization. And I realized, why not turn this into a business? So now I'm helping out companies with not only their optimization of their profile, but also the lead gen side as well as content creation. So it's been great, and thankfully not affected too much by COVID as well.
Yeah. And where are you based out of?
Orlando, Florida.
Out of Orlando, Florida. Mm-hmm. Coming to Orlando in February. Maybe.
Really? Maybe. That's always the caveat now, right?
Yeah. Maybe. All right. So, I mean, that's really cool. So, all right. So I'm going to spin this to our audience. I think there's LinkedIn obviously is a big player. And I'm assuming that when you're coaching or talking with the college kids and on your podcast, do you encourage more people to be using LinkedIn in the professional world coming out of college? Like, where do you kind of steer them today? Job searching, is LinkedIn, like, you got to be on LinkedIn? Is that kind of what comes out of your mouth?
I tell people to get on LinkedIn, and the number one reason why is because the stat is something crazy. Like 70 to 80% of all jobs never even make it to job boards. So that means the Indeeds, the LinkedIns, the monsters.coms of the world, they're only really getting the bottom of the barrel in terms of job opportunities. So the question comes, how do you find those 70 or 80% of the other jobs? And that's where networking comes into play. And the number one platform to network is arguably LinkedIn. And then if you're trying to get into tech, there's an argument to be made that Twitter is a really good platform to use as well. So, but for the general purposes, I always try to push people to LinkedIn because you're able to establish such a unique connection, especially if you can find someone at the company that you want to work for that produces content. Most people don't get a lot of engagement on their stuff. So if you're constantly popping up on their timeline, commenting on their stuff, liking their content, you become that car that your friend just bought. And now you see that same model, that car all over the place, but before your friend bought it, you'd never even heard of that car before. But now because you're in front of their face all the time, you're like, oh my God, I'm seeing that Lamborghini everywhere, or that Tesla everywhere. So that's why I always tell people to get on LinkedIn.
Yeah, for sure. Nice cars, Justin.
Trust me, I don't know anyone that has a Lambo, but Teslas, I mean, they're popping up everywhere down here in Florida.
Yeah, I bet they are. Well, I mean, that's interesting. You mentioned Gary Vee earlier, and that is one of his techniques is, you're just not going to be known. You need to engage. You need to reach out. You need to comment on what people are doing. You need to put yourself into their circle, right? That's the what am I going to get out of you versus the other way around. Like, so if you want to connect with me, best way to connect with me is hey, engage on the show. Come on and talk about us. Do something with us. And I think that's a very really really big thing for people to understand and comment on. But I also think that Gen Z. Listen, you guys grew up with phones in your hands and texting. It's normal.
Yeah, I agree. I think we're more used to it, of course, right, compared to older generations. But I would say that you need to adapt to survive. I think the job market right now, especially right now, there's so many people that are looking for jobs, whether it be because households need two incomes or because of the whole pandemic that's going on. There's a lot of people that look for jobs right now. And it's become less of a job search and more of a marketing play. Whether you're trying to get a job in healthcare or real estate or building or whatever it may be, you have to market yourself in the right way. And that can be numerous things. That can be showing up on someone's LinkedIn page every single day of the week, or it could be sending a great cold email to the founder or the hiring manager at the company that you want to work for. So I think that's what people fail to understand, and at their fault, not necessarily at their fault, because most people don't know about marketing, but just because of how social media has played a role, you have to learn it at least a little bit if you want to stand a chance in this job market.
Well, that's it. That comes down to, Miles, we talk about it all the time, right? You are a brand.
Right.
That's everybody has to look at themselves, whether they work for themselves or they work for somebody else or with somebody else, however you want to say it. But everybody has to realize that in today's digital world, and this is the other thing Gary Vee always says, because I'm a fan, is the number one asset in the world is people's attention. Right.
I agree. And I think this is where networking goes wrong. People always say it's about who you know. And I would argue it doesn't really matter who you know. It's about who remembers you. And that's where attention comes into play. Because I used to go to these networking events and like the career fairs and everything like that. And I would try to shake as many hands as possible. And what would end up happening is I would shake so many hands, would not have a story to remember when it came to reaching back out on these business cards. So I would have to send a very bland response back to them. And I would usually not get a response. But when I stopped trying to shake 100 hands and only shook 5 or 10, I would have a meaningful conversation with them, be able to write down some notes that I could tangibly send a nice thank you note or a nice email to, and then my response rate would shoot up. And that's what people don't realize is it's not about who you know. It's about who remembers you. Because if they don't remember you when you reach back out, they're just going to disregard that email or that thank you note.
Yeah, for sure. Take on it. And did you come up with that? I haven't heard that before.
Yeah, I mean, yeah.
Trademark, Justin Nguyen, right there.
I need to put it on a t-shirt.
Yeah. I'm curious. when we talk cheat codes, you're talking out through the lens of what college students should do, right? And what you're talking about, what should employers do? Like people that are watching this, a lot of them aren't college students. So what's a cheat code for the established executive? What can they do so that college students remember them and want to work at their company, be seen as a progressive company that can attract the new and best talent?
Yeah, and Justin, I want to add to that, Miles, to broaden the picture. Miles is exactly right. And one of the things, and I see a comment from Dr. Brent Musson, who we're going to get to in a minute, but we're looking for people in our trades, right? The construction industry, kids don't want to swing hammers anymore. But here's the deal. We're 3D printing now, houses, right? There's so much automation and so much BIM, like virtual reality, VR, AR coming into our space. You know, we need to know how to talk to Generation Z to get them interested in our industry. So I think to add to like what Miles said, for those of us, you know, I don't know if he's calling old, but we're older. I heard yesterday, Miles, I'm as old as I'll ever be. I'm as old as I ever was and as young as I'll ever be is what I heard.
There you go.
There you go.
So, but with that said, you know, this is twofold. This is an opportunity for us to actually that are looking for people in our industry to hear, all right, well, how do we get their attention? It's a twofold question, right?
I think for the younger generations, Gen Z in particular, the number one thing that we resonate the most with is stories. Who can tell the greatest story right now? And that's why I think you're seeing video games pop off so much right now, because they tell the best story. Whether it's Fortnite and watching I think Boga was like 16 years old and he won $3 million or something like that, and you aspire to see that. What that might look like for the 3D printing industry is look at some of these hot TikTok channels. Some of them are, it's like the satisfying way to like destroy something. They'll take like a power saw and they'll just like break a Lego in half, and then it'll get 5 million views. But that's just because we like the story that tells of, we've always been around this Lego piece our whole life. We played with Legos, but we've always wondered what would it take to break something in half. And by you doing it in a unique way, it tells an interesting story. And that can be how you start to get people interested in something that might be mundane in terms of like swinging an axe or swinging a hammer, you know? So I think what these industries such as insurance or bricklaying or whatever, construction, whatever it may be, I think what needs to come is talking about focusing more on the sexy side. And I think every industry has that sexiness to it. You just have to find a way to pull it out. For instance, with me, career education, it's not the sexiest industry at all, right? Everyone hates talking about careers. But when you put the spin of hearing about rags to riches stories, or hearing about the college student that had no internships getting and graduating with 5, right? Or you hear about the individual that was able to grow his podcast from 0 all the way to a top 100 podcast and interview billionaires. Like, those are things that my generation can resonate with because they're seeing it and it's tangible and it's from someone that looks like them and sounds like them. So it's, how can you find someone in your industry that looks like and sounds like the audience that you want to hit, and then speak in their language rather than speak down to them?
Yeah, for sure. Well, let's put Brett's comment up there real quick. Dr. Brett Musson from LA. What's happening, Doc? Best way to brand market yourself is to be a valuable person, not just portray one. What do you say to that?
I agree. I think when we say be a valuable person, I think there's this sort of stigma behind that you need to be an expert in something to be a valuable person. And especially coming from the student perspective, but also from the professional side of things, you might feel like you're just getting started and you don't have this credibility in a specific space. And what I would say is, think back to how you created your best friend back in 3rd grade or 5th grade or whatever it was. Did you tap him on the shoulder and say, hey, I'll give you 5 Legos for your 5 French fries at lunch? Probably not. What probably happened was you guys went out to the playscape, figured out that you both like soccer, and that's where that relationship started. So how can you do that same thing in the real world? And I think one of the best ways to be a valuable person is to listen, but also ask a great question. I don't think there's enough people that listen enough, and they're just about trying to extract as much information out of you, that if you listen and ask a genuine question, and we all know what the difference between a genuine question and just a question that someone's trying to get an answer out of us, that's what makes the difference. And I think that's where you see the best networkers really shine, is they know how to listen and be a great person a great listener, and then ask that amazing question at the end to keep your attention.
Yeah.
And that plays into how you're remembered, right? Your whole thing's not who you know, it's who remembers you. If you have that great question and they remember that you listened and didn't just blabber the whole time, they remember that, because that's a rare thing, right? Everybody else is just trying to extract something, like you said.
Yeah, you have two ears and one mouth, so use it in that ratio. That's what someone told me once, and I'm like, wow, that's genius.
That is great advice, because you're absolutely right. I mean, I start tuning somebody out when they just keep going and going and going, and that's just the way it is, I think, for most people. So awesome. All right, listen, if you're joining us, we are on LinkedIn Live, YouTube Live, and Facebook Live with Justin Nguyen, Miles Biggs Idea. So hit that like and share button. If you have any questions, please put them in the comments. Dr. Brett Musson, we always appreciate you tuning in from LA. And Miles, what was it that you got out of speaking with Justin? What was your biggest takeaway? Yeah,
and that was something.
And don't sugarcoat it.
That was something I wanted to come back to in this conversation, but it's just what I've been thinking of since we did the podcast. It was last week. It was real back-to-back Justin here for me. But it's this whole idea of design thinking. You said you had that workshop, but I really like, you said it again here, about not just designing something that you like and then testing it, but thinking about what's going to resonate with your customers and then designing it for what they want and then giving it to them. And I think that's something that most companies don't do. People sit around in a boardroom and they talk about how great they are and how awesome their thing is, whatever it is, and how it's going to be great. And then they also talk about why no one's buying it and what's wrong with all these people, right? And it's because they don't think it's cool just because you think it's cool. And so I think that's a really important thing for everyone to actually hear, going back to listening, actually hear that idea and listen to it and not just let it wash over you. That if we go back and look at our businesses, I think most of us would find that a lot of the services we offer or the way we talk about them, the photos we have of them, they're serving our own egos and interests and not necessarily being of value to the customer.
Yeah, I mean, it's super tough to do, right? Because just because we think our thoughts, we always think that we're right. And it's been really unique for me because I truly think that everyone has an idea, but the problem is the execution. And I think the better execution is by having this idea, but then going out to the initial audience that would purchase that product or service or whatever it may be, and then talking to them and seeing how would they like that. And I think this design thinking, I believe the example that Colin gave me was the designers of, it was either Keurig or what's the really nice vacuum cleaner? It has like the ball in the middle. Dyson. Yeah. So it was either Keurig or Dyson. And I think the founder of that company was the one that really came up with this design thinking principle. And you can see it in the Dyson product, right? There's not another vacuum that is like that. And I mean, if we're really talking about it, the only real difference behind it is there's a ball and a little bit of engineering. And because of that ball, you're able to twist and turn just a little bit, and you're able to get to these little crevices that you weren't able to do before. And that's where you can really see the power of design thinking, because you're not just creating a product to solve your problem. You're creating a product that solves your problem, but in a way that helps everyone else.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, and I don't know how you figure that out, but if you think about, you put a vacuum in somebody's hand and you watch them use it, right? To your point about getting it to them, getting feedback, you would notice things like that. Look how hard it is for them to maneuver it. What if we did this? That would help that person, not you. Right.
I think it comes down to asking questions too. Like for us, what we found out is when we did launch our first podcast, which was like 2 years ago, it was that long 45-minute to 60-minute podcast. And when we looked at the analytics, we saw that most students were dropping off at the like 10 or 15-minute range. So when we were like, why are we putting in so much effort in terms of having this long conversation if no one's going to listen to it? So we went back out and we looked at the career landscape in general in terms of like career podcasts, and every single podcast was 45 minutes to 60 minutes. So
Right.
we knew that we couldn't stand out there. So we took the approach of how can we shorten it with 5 to 15 minutes? And then that's when we started to ask the students listening of like, hey, what do you pay attention to the most? And everyone kept on saying YouTube and TikTok. And that's when we thought of short content as well as splicing in different perspectives into the show to keep people's attentions. And that's where we came up with the product that we have today.
Which is so interesting because if they're binging it, they're probably listening for an hour.
Exactly.
Multiple episodes. It's not just one
Yeah.
for a full hour. Yeah.
Which
But
is
they
super
get through
fun. Exactly. They get through it. And we've seen our retention rate go from like 30 or 40% before to now about 70 to 80%. So it's been a huge increase in terms of people that are staying to the end. Right. And the fact that they're doing that over multiple episodes means that our information is actually getting across rather than just getting lost at the end of an episode. So it's been great to see.
Yeah, it's interesting because we do a lot of micro content from these videos as well, and they drive so much traffic, right, to YouTube and everything else because it's that 30 second, 1 minute little conversation that we're having, But interestingly enough, like on LinkedIn Live, we'll start off, low, then it picks up, and then it just drops. But what's interesting, if I stay on an hour, it starts going back up. And I don't know if it's because people are scrolling through and they're just joining as they come in or whatever the case is, or if LinkedIn algorithm pushes it out. But it's a really hard thing to capture. And I think you're doing it the right way because you have a very particular audience that you're going after, and you understand what their buying needs, what's their attention spans, what are they interested in. Like you said, hey, I'm on TikTok. I can get stuck on TikTok for hours if I don't watch myself. Before you know it, it's like midnight. Like, God, I got to put this down and go to bed, because I look at it. In fact, I know there's a lot of controversy around it, but it's also one of those things. It's a big platform, but I'm not doing personal stuff on it. I'm doing business stuff. So
I think with TikTok, the reason that it sucks your attention so much is because the algorithm is just so good. Right, it's literally showing you things that you never knew that you would be like interested in, and then now you're in a rabbit hole on food TikTok at like 2 a.m. and you're starving. Right, so I think what we were trying to figure out is how can we take that algorithm mindset of putting the right things in front of these students' ears at this point at the right time, and that's when we started to use LinkedIn in terms of our company page. By putting out a post and saying, hey, what do you guys want to hear for season 6, or who do you want to hear from? And then what I would do on my end, because we all know that LinkedIn company pages are notoriously bad for engagement. I would literally sit there with these students and just message them one-on-one saying, hey, just created this post on our company page. Would love to know your thoughts for an upcoming season. And that's how we started to generate a little bit of buzz. But you have to put in the time and the effort to be able to get in front of these students or your audience, especially if you're not on a great algorithmic or social media platform like TikTok.
Yeah, no, for sure. I'll give you a little feedback. Dr. Brett Mustin said, amen, have a huge unselfish mission. And then he also just wrote this, describing VOC, voice of the customer.
Dr. Brent with the fire. I appreciate that. We definitely got to connect, and I would love to learn more about like what you're doing. That's awesome.
Dr. Brent is in our world. He's in offsite construction, and he's done a lot of research. So he's actually one of the leading guys out in LA. Well, he's become one of the leading guys. He wrote a big research paper that got a lot of attention. So definitely in the offsite construction world, has Mustin factories as well. So he's a nice guy. I like the guy.
He's got a great profile picture. He looks like a nice guy.
Yeah, no, Dr. Mustin's a great guy. And, he always has something to say. See, what's interesting is, like we were saying before, and this is what people really need to understand, Justin. We have a lot of people, like the numbers are going back up again as I watch them, right? It kind of goes up and down. But our industry knows how to talk, needs to understand how to talk to, your generation, period. Because as Margaret Whalen would say in our industry, we have PMS. We're pale, male, and stale, right? She says it all the time, right? And she's right, but now that there's a disruption happening, there's a change happening in the world. Now people are really taking a good hard look at construction and offsite construction, and all the players that have been sitting at the top of the rungs for all these years, it's starting to hurt their pockets because we don't have skilled labor. So this is what's kind of happening. So you get somebody like Dr. Musson and some of these others that have really studied and researched how to disrupt, how to change, how to use technology to build better, build faster, build smarter, build healthier homes. But the issue is, how do we get the youth in? How do we become the who's the guy? Dirty Jobs, Mike Rowe.
Mike Rowe. I think what would be like a really interesting case study for your industry to look at is the finance industry, right? For your generations, even Miles probably too, of finances was never really this thing that people wanted to talk about. It was kind of hush hush.
You're told not to talk about it, saying it's not polite to talk about money.
Yeah, like I remember, like people were like, "Why would you want to talk about money?" But nowadays, if you look on YouTube, finance is one of the biggest influencers on that platform. You have people like Graham Stephan, who is in the real estate space, but he also creates a ton of content around finance. He's getting millions of views, like tens of 20s of thousands of millions of views every single month. And I think if you guys can figure out how have they made it sexy, quote unquote sexy, obviously because of like money, it's a little bit easier. You can showcase the Lambos and people do that. But how can you find these similar tactics that they've used to be able to create great content for your industry? And I think 3D printing is something that is, even though it's a little older in terms of in the news, like it's been there for a while, right, a lot of people don't understand it. And it kind of died in the wind, even though it was this super interesting like technology that came out, I think 5 or 10 years ago or so. I would highlight that. That's something that I would love to watch.
Well, that's kind of what's happening, right? So as Michael Tonart's tuned in here, Miles, I don't know if you saw. So fintech is cool now. So fintech is like that's a heavily used word. In fact, it's come up this week several times in some of my meetings. People coming from the fintech world into our world, and I have to tell you, even with fintech, now there's going to be what do they call it? Housing tech or construct tech. There's another
got to be a road tech, right? Like home tech.
Well, like with like smart homes, I think like right now, this big thing on TikTok, and some people are faking it, but others aren't, of what they will do is they will program their LED lights. These kids will program their LED lights in their room so that every time that they get a follower on TikTok, it lights up. And like, if you
know how to do that,
I'm sorry?
I want to learn how to do that.
Yeah, but if you can create content like that to showcase like smart homes and cool, that's what people want to see. So if you can that's how you can suck them in to like housing and smart homes and all that. And then you can hit them with a little bit more technical things.
Right.
But that's like top of the funnel. And you're starting to see some of those shifts like that. And TikTok was one of those examples. But I think there's a bunch of unique ways that the housing industry could do, because I mean, my generation, we watch HD TV just because our parents put it on, but it's like really cool how some of these houses get transformed. Right. And with obviously the boom of like, like wholesaling ads on YouTube and stuff, people are interested about real estate. How can you find a unique spin on that to promote home building? I think there's a niche for you guys to hit there.
Yeah, for sure. I agree. All right, let's look here. See, this is what's so valuable. Hit me up. Tell me how I can be a resource to you. So yeah, definitely connect with Brett. We got Andrew Seeley. Hey, Andrew. Today's show is mining some genuine gold, and Brett Musson is really adding to it. Way to go. Love it. So all big players in our world of innovative construction and technology and modular construction, pods, you name it. These guys they're all in there. So Miles, you wanna add to this?
I don't have much else to add at this point. I'm looking at the time. We talk about our hour mark. I feel like we covered everything I had in mind for Justin, and appreciate you coming on, Justin. I feel like I was spamming Justin the past couple of weeks. Getting him on one show and right into another. So I'm happy that he gave us his time.
No worries.
No, I know, Justin. I think it would be good to have a follow up with you as well. I think there's a lot to tap into here, and I think heading into a holiday weekend and some other stuff. I think this video is going to get some views throughout the weekend when people are settled down wherever they're going and what they're doing. But I do appreciate your knowledge. I do enjoy watching what you're putting out there. I have to be honest. I do not listen to every episode of your podcast. There you go. There's another one. George Ryman. What's happening, George? Good to see you today. So he agreed with me or with Justin or with Miles? Who are you agreeing with, George?
Everybody. We agree with everybody. But one thing I'll add to this, right, is I like bringing up ideas live because then we get people committed to them. But we talked about, Dave, the idea of breaking down people's brands live with Jen. And I think it's something that we could bring Justin in because it's the idea of content and design thinking the content that falls into the brand. So we could create this powerhouse panel, get somebody on here as a guinea pig, and then just live as develop that plan for how we get after it. If it's a recruitment campaign to appeal to college kids or something, that'd be a fun piece of content to produce on the show. Yeah,
no, we're definitely going to continue that conversation about breaking down people's brands and what they're doing. So we just pick somebody and we just have at it, whether it's a company, a personal profile, whatever. I think it could be a lot of fun, and in a good way, not to be mean to anybody.
Of course,
for sure. Well, listen, everybody, I appreciate you for joining Justin. Thank you so much. If you're out there, if you could please hit that like and share button one last time. And if you could, definitely trying to grow our YouTube channel. So please subscribe to our YouTube channel. That's where you can watch all this content over and over and over again till your heart is content. And we're also going to have a bunch of micro content there. So it's the cliff notes of all these shows. So just like Justin was saying, you can get the best of and you can binge watch all of it. So that's coming up as well. So, all right, Miles, Justin, you guys hang tight. We'll come right back to you. Thanks, everybody, for watching. And we will see you tomorrow at 1 o'clock, BS Friday with Mark Bare Naked Willie. And we're going to have Siga North America on with Etienne and Sean. So you definitely want to be there. We're going to talk about house wraps and house barriers. And not only are we going to talk about it, we're going to talk about the technicalities of it and how important it is for you to have a dry, safe, and most importantly, a healthy home. So we will see you guys tomorrow. Justin, Miles, hang tight. We'll see you next time.
See ya.